Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Eye on College Basketball YouTube channel. I'm CBS sports writer David Cobb, joined by 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting Adam Finklestein. Adam, how are we doing today?
Great. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. I'm especially invigorated because there are new class of 2024 rankings out, courtesy of you and the guys over at 24/7 Sports. And I got to say, my biggest takeaway here is that it's now late September of 2022, and John Shire doesn't have a commitment yet from this class of 2024. Is he losing his touch? Is that what we're looking at?
Well, as I alluded to last week, and you told me to slow down, as I recall. I said, hey, he doesn't have anybody for 24 yet. But and given how early he got 22 and 23 done, I do think it is notable. But I am more than confident that Duke will end up just fine in the 2024 class. But they are not playing with the same type of advantage in the calendar that they did in 2023. They've got some catching up to do.
Yes, and it's okay. They've got the number one class in 22 and the number one class in 23 lined up. So John Shire is doing just fine. Very few players from this class of 2024 are committed yet. But hey, look, with 18 out of the top 30 and 23 already committed, it is time to start looking ahead a little bit. You guys have done that. And I want to start out big picture, because if you want to know more about Trey Johnson and some of these other guys who are in the top 10, there's lots of content out there on that. But big picture, Adam, how does the 24 class, now that it's starting to take shape a little bit, shape up at the top compared to the last 3 or 4 recruiting cycles?
Well, listen, the candid reality is that neither 23 nor 24 at this point in time is perceived as an especially strong class collectively. I've talked about how I think 23 has deceptive depth, but 24, when you look at it, doesn't yet have as much pop as we've seen in classes in some of the recent years. Now, we're only halfway done with high school, and that can certainly change, especially when you think about the fact that for this class, their freshman year was basically lost due to COVID. So there is still time for it to change. But right now, the perception among not only college coaches, but NBA evaluators who are out this summer is that, geez, this class doesn't yet seem to have the real star power. And what can complicate that even more is the fact that, as we've seen in recent years, the trend is for some of the players at the top of the class to very likely contemplate reclassification. And so you can only assume that some of these players may end up in 23. And so by extension, this class could get watered down further. Now, the class behind it, 25, which we will not get into a whole lot of depth with today, but that is a very good class. So if you take that reclassification trend and you extend it out and you say, well, if some of those kids end up in this 24 class, now you have a group that could end up being better than it currently projects right now. And some of that is going to happen organically as well, because different players are going to emerge here over the course of the next 18 months.
Yeah, it seems like the college coaches are still kind of waiting to get a better feel on this class as well. If you go and look out of the top 30 right now, only one is committed. That's Jason Azamoda, committed to Baylor. So just a lot of possibilities still with this class. It could still be some movements in the rankings. Real quick, give us the rundown of how we reached this Trey Johnson at number one. I know you've gone into detail quite a bit on him other places, but the quick synopsis on how this class shaped up at the top.
So basically, it came down to 4 players, the top 4 players in the rankings, and ultimately it was a 2-man race with Trey Johnson and Ian Jackson. Ian Jackson is one of those players who is undeniably productive, maybe the most productive player in the class, certainly among the perimeter players, I would say. He's also older for his grade, so you had to take that into consideration. Johnson is still developing. He's early on in that overall curve from potential into production, but the upside is very, very high because he's got legitimate big guard skills with really good positional size. He shoots it. He makes shots off the dribble. He's got a handle. And as I said, there's a ton of untapped physical potential. So when you start to forecast what the long-term projection could look like, he had the one that we were most optimistic about at the moment. But the thing that I emphasize always, and with this class in particular, there is no one in this group that where long-term success at the highest levels is a foregone conclusion just yet. I would say Trey Johnson and Ian Jackson, players like that, they are farther along. They have more markers for future success, but that is not a guarantee without, continued progression that typically correlates with work ethic, humility, and some of the common variables like that. So Trey's got a great upside. He's got that size skill combination, the shot making, the handle that's really valued in the modern day game. But we're in like lap one of what's a very long race. So we're going to have to see how this continues to evolve.
Yeah, I like that we're not coronating an Amadi Bates out of this class just yet. I did see some of the highlights of Trey Johnson. His pull-up jumper game looks really smooth. He looks like a fluid player who can knock down shots from behind the arc with ease. But looking at the top of this class, one thing that really stuck out to me is overtime elites Nas Cunningham at number 3, which really constitutes an unprecedentedly high ranking for a player in this overtime elite program, which has emerged as a alternative option for high school prospects who don't want to play in traditional high schools. And they're making money through this overtime elite, and they're still viable college prospects in this era where your amateurism status, I guess, doesn't really define your eligibility for the NCAA anymore. What's the buzz around the fact that we've got an overtime elite player now a couple years into this program who is really high on the board right now for the class of 2024?
Well, Nas Cunningham is clearly the poster child for that. But to be clear, he's not the only player. I mean, Overtime Elite has kind of iterated, I guess you would say, in this latest chapter of their development. And now they have players who are not accepting salaries. I think that's a really important point to make is whatever money they are accepting is reportedly NIL money, which is the basis for them maintaining their NCAA eligibility. Now, we have yet to see, we are told that they will be eligible for the NCAA, but we have yet to see someone go through the process and the NCAA sign off on that yet. But the expectation is that Nas Cunningham and several other high-profile high school players competing with OTE this year will maintain their college eligibility. And to that end, we've seen college coaches going to recruit down at the OTE facility for the first time this fall. They've come out in full force, as you would expect. We've seen OTE players take official visits. Just this past weekend, Williams was down at Auburn as part of a very big visit for Bruce Pearl and his staff. So this really is, I think, more important than any one player. Nas Cunningham, obviously the most recognizable, given the fact that he was the top-ranked prospect in this 2024 class. And when he decided to make the move to OTE, he was the first one to say, hey, I'm not going to take a salary because I'm maintaining my college eligibility. Previously, this was essentially perceived, at least, as an alternative path to G League Ignite for kids who only wanted to go pro and were not interested in playing college basketball anymore. That's no longer the case. Nas Cunningham and a number of others, that's why they're still in the rankings, because they are being recruited to play college basketball. And until they say otherwise, the expectation is that they will play college basketball. So it's very notable just in the overall landscape of grassroots basketball and recruiting that continues to change, because OTE has, pivoted from a strictly professional option to essentially a competitor for elite high school programs as a feeding ground for college basketball programs. And I also think you're going to see this model expand. I've been told they're going to form their own league, almost a competitor of sorts. You've got different leagues like the NIBC and the Grind Session, who try and combine top high school programs from around the country with different kind of different academic criteria for each league. But OTE going to apparently create something similar and showcase not just their own players, but players from other high school programs as well. So it's just, Nas Cunningham, as I said, he's the most recognizable one, but there's a number of players now who are following this path.
Yeah, and if you're worried about the academic credentials of the program, well, Stanford is not, because they have a commitment from Kanan Carlisle in the class of 2023. He's a four-star guy who is committed to Stanford. He's playing for Overtime Elite. So interesting also in that 2023 class, Jeremy Fears, number 33 overall prospect, he's committed to Michigan State out of Overtime Elite.
He
then
opted out, actually. He committed initially, and then he decided not to attend. So he changed his mind. But there's a number of others who followed through on the commitment.
Okay, so in that case, I don't know how much detail you know there, but is it a situation where he says, well, I would actually like to collect a salary, or, is he just going G Leaguer? I mean, do you know
No,
much about?
I think he went to go play with his brother in his last year of high school basketball. So, but they've got guys like Tyler Bay, Ja'Kai Howard, Bryson Tiller. You mentioned Kanan Carlisle, Trey Parker. I mean, these are all players who have given us every indication that they intend to play college basketball. And to be clear, if all these players end up getting approved as they go through the what is affectionately referred to as the clearinghouse, which is now the NCAA eligibility center. But if the NCAA ends up clearing all these places, all these kids, both from an academic standpoint as well as from an amateurism standpoint, I think you could potentially see the floodgates really start to open and OT become an even bigger destination for high profile high school talent, and not necessarily just those who want to play professionally, but ones who want to play in college as well.
Well, it's just an interesting development because a couple years ago, the death of college basketball was pronounced again amid the emergence of Overtime Elite, amid the emergence of G League Ignite, as the NBL in New Zealand and Australia was taken off, right? College basketball was going to be done. And you had Mick Cronin and Penny Hardaway out there sounding the alarms. And that has actually turned out not to be the case. And the reason why is because of NIL. Because
it's ironic because NIL was supposed to kill college basketball too.
And it saved it. It saved it because all these guys, who were maybe going to go to Overtime Elite and then just not even play college ball, they were going to make more money as juniors and seniors in high school than you could traditionally in college basketball, and then just go straight to New Zealand or G League Ignite or whatever. And college basketball was going to be missing out on all these high caliber elite level talents. And that's not the way that it's played out, because the money that you can get through NIL at college is so significant and substantial, as well as the exposure and everything, that turns out college basketball is just fine.
Yeah, I would argue college basketball was going to be fine either way. I think it was more, when NIL came around, people were the argument was there's not enough money, and it remains to be seen if there's going to be enough money for all of the non-revenue producing sports in NCAA athletics. But I think college basketball, as it relates to those programs that make money, what we've seen is that there's still a market for NIL and for those programs to be profitable. I think, the part of that most people don't recognize is usually it's men's basketball and college football at the biggest schools that fund the entire athletic department, because most of these sports operate at a loss every year because they're not revenue producing. And even, every sport, there's a major expenditure that goes along with it when you talk about coaches' salaries and travel and scholarships and things like that. So as it specific to NIL, I think the trend is very clear. You've got players coming back to college basketball that wouldn't have done so in previous years. Maybe they're a better fit for the college game, and they're certainly able to command a higher salary, so to speak, based on NIL than they would in the NBA. We've talked about how this is the year of the big man, and that's exactly why. The same thing is true in the high school ranks, because you had guys like Amani Bates and Jalen Duren, and let's face it, NIL was a big part of why they decided to play college basketball last year as opposed to going to the G League Ignite. By extension, the G League Ignite's main competitor was Overtime Elite, and it had been perceived as kind of the lesser of two options. This iteration, where now they are maybe even the primary NIL destination for potential college prospects, I think is a very significant development when we start to consider what their longevity will be.
So this 2024 class, new rankings out, 150 players ranked. 4 of them are Overtime Elite players. We've touched on Nas Cunningham. He's a small forward, ranked number 3. You also have number 31, Jaden Williams, a center. Number 93, Ja'Kai Howard, a small forward. And then the only committed player from Overtime Elite in the 2024 class right now is number 150 overall. That's ZZ Clark, a point guard out of Illinois. Adam, I did run some analytics on the share of sub 6 foot players in the 2024 rankings. Have you done this? Have you researched this yet?
No, we're talking David Cobb Jr. We're going back to that.
Hey, look, here's the deal. I've got to defend the short guys. I got to make sure you guys are doing them right in the rankings.
I meant to clip this last week. Can we get this? Can we like get a throwback here to who was the player that you were very upset about? You said, listen, if you were 4 inches taller, he'd be ranked higher.
It's yes, a kid, the kid Xavier, who you guys have as a he's decently ranked, but yeah, Trey Green. He's number 66 overall, and y'all would have him up at like 30. If he was 6'1" and you were like, yeah, duh, great eval, man. Like being taller does help in basketball.
Yeah, but that's a fair summarization of that argument. Yeah.
Okay, but I did look it up. You guys have 3 sub 6 footers in the 2024 top 150, which is the same number that you have in the 2023 top 150. So I'm just out here like, man, when are guys like Zakai Ziegler and Posh Alexander gonna teach Adam that you got to look at the sub 6 footers, man?
Yeah, and you know what's funny about first of all, you're going well played because you're going 2 guys in like my home region in the Northeast who and you know what, in full disclosure, I should have ranked Posh. I was at ESPN at the time, but I kind of knew it because he was a really good fit at St. John's. I knew he was going to have like an immediate opportunity, but yeah, no, your point is a good one. Well, no, it's not necessarily a good one, but your ammunition is well played. I'll give you that. But yeah, height still matters. It mattered last week. It matters this week. It's important, and skill is more important than ever. But skill with positional size is the sweet spot these days.
I haven't watched a single second of Marcus Burton highlight tape, but he's number 150 in the class of 2023 and committed to Notre Dame. Just watch. Marcus Burton is going to turn into Marcus Howard in the Big East this year.
Yeah, well, hey, and that's possible. And for every Marcus Howard, there's 100 other guys who are now, at home on Monday morning watching this live podcast because they are not in the NBA.
Good stuff. Well, speaking of Marcus Burton and Notre Dame and Trey Green and Xavier, we do have some more Big East talk coming up. We're going to get into Uconn and what Dan Hurley is doing right now. But first, check this out.
The Uefa Champions League. 9 months of heart-stopping, hold-your-breath exhilaration. While Mbappe shines in the city of lights, Benzema's racking up the hat tricks, and the Reds want more magic in Liverpool. This ain't amateur hour. This is the best of the best of the best. This is the Uefa Champions League. Stream every match live on Paramount+.
So, the latest addition for Dan Hurley's Uconn class is 4-star wing Jalen Stewart. So now heading into year 5 at Uconn, Dan Hurley coming off back-to-back NCAA tournament appearances after inheriting a program that was struggling down the stretch under Kevin Ollie. So the next step for Uconn is kind of returning to national prominence by actually winning an NCAA tournament game. So haven't gotten there yet, but Dan Hurley is adding some players who could certainly help him accomplish that because Uconn is now. Are you
still mad about the short thing? Because you came out swinging there. That's.
Hey, Dan Hurley is the type who would come out swinging as well, and he was an undersized point guard as well. So I think he would agree with me. Don't you think that the undersized point guards need to get their due?
I'm not going to speculate. We're not going back to that one. Keep going. All right. You threw the Uconn hate out there. They got to win an NCAA tournament game. What else?
Yeah, there's no hate here though, because the reality is they've got the number 3 class in the country right now, which is, would be a historic level of a finish for Uconn. I mean, under Hurley, they had the number 7 class in 2021. But man, I mean, what is going on with Uconn here? It's just like they are guns blazing now up to number 3 in the team rankings. I mean, what's your thought on the way this class is shaping up for the Huskies?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. First of all, they have recruited really well since Hurley arrived in Stores. And when you look at where the program was where he took over versus kind of the historical presence of the program, what was necessary first was rebuilding the brand locally in the Northeast region. And in the first few years, they did that. And they recruited, they went head to head with some of the top programs in the region. and they came out on top, and it went all the way from New England down through the DMV. So they cast a really wide net in the Northeast region, but they very rarely went beyond that. They really tried to assert themselves in the home region, and they did an excellent job of it. Now, historically, under Jim Calhoun, this is a program that recruited nationally. That was once easier than it is now. But, Emeka Okafor came from Texas. Karan Butler came from Wisconsin. You had Marcus Williams came from California. Khalid El-Amim came from Minnesota. So there were different players from different parts of the country. You saw Uconn try to extend their geographic reach this spring and this summer. They were pursuing players who were not just from the Northeast. They were doing it visibly. They were hosting these guys on official visits. Obviously, Stephon Castle from Georgia was the first example of that, but he is a player who does have Northeast roots. Jalen Stewart from the state of Washington, from Seattle, is significant in this evolution of their recruiting because he made the choice to come cross country, chose UConn over two different Pac-12 schools, one of which who's going to be making the transition to the Big Ten. So this was notable for UConn, first and foremost, because it really does extend the reach of their recruiting arm. The other reason it's notable is because Jalen Stewart was really under-recruited. You go back and you watch that film and you see a guy who's 6'7", 215 pounds, and can make every shot in the book. He's got a soft touch from three. He's got all kinds of step backs and rips and jabs into tough pull-ups. He can go to the post. He can operate off the dribble. He can play through contact. So this is a highly talented offensive player, combo forward, big wing, call him whatever you want. But he's going to have an immediate impact on the offensive end of the floor. And speaking to the class collectively, you've got 4 players committed. They're hoping to round out the class with a big man. There are expectations at UConn that you're going to see several of their top players be candidates for the NBA next year. You mentioned Adamo Sanogo, Jordan Hawkins, and Andre Jackson are 2 other players who Dan Hurley, even last week, has publicly said they're going to have an opportunity to play themselves into the first round of the NBA draft. So you're looking at a team that graduated significant players last year and could potentially lose their top 3 players after this year as well. Remember, this is also a program that has already put James Bouknight into the NBA. They had into the lottery, pardon me. They had Tyrese Martin get drafted in the second round and earn a contract this year. So they are very quickly kind of rebranding the program, establishing themselves strong in the Northeast. They're building pros, which was always a huge part of the brand under Coach Calhoun. And now they are extending that recruiting blueprint to different parts of the country.
Since you pitched me earlier as the anti-UConn in the intro here, I am going to play.
By the way, just in case, I should throw that in as a disclaimer. Yeah.
Okay, I think I knew that, but I definitely forgotten that. Makes sense though. I'm just going to play devil's advocate for a little bit though, because
let's do it.
You lose RJ Cole and Tyrese Martin, who were 2 of your top 3 scorers, guys who could really get buckets for you on the perimeter. You're going to a big man oriented system now, I would assume, with Adama Sanogo as your leading scorer and somebody who could absolutely have a monster year in the Big East. But this is a team that didn't win a game in the NCAA tournament last season, hasn't won one in the NCAA tournament in quite a while. Gary Parrish doesn't have him in his top 25 and 1. So you have this right now, the number 3 overall class lined up. I mean, how confident are we that if UConn stumbles out of the gates and maybe it looks like a bubble team, is this thing for sure? Is this a lock to get to the finish line as a top 10 class? Or, I mean, do you sense that there could be some attrition here if it doesn't go well on the court?
No. First of all, I expect they're going to have a very good season. I would respectfully disagree with GP's prediction there. I think the one thing, the Achilles heel for this year's UConn team could be depth. They are, if they stay healthy, though, I think that you've got a chance to be one of the better programs in the Big East, assuming that Creighton is kind of the preseason favorite. But Adamo Sanogo, who was a dominant interior force last year, I think will continue to do so this year. I think you're going to see Andre Jackson really develop into kind of, first of all, he's an absolutely explosive, truly elite athlete. And he's got some kind of point forward type ability that hasn't come to the forefront yet. He's been a good passer since he was an underclassman in high school. I think he'll get an opportunity to show more of that this year. Jordan Hawkins is a skilled shot maker and a bouncy athlete with really good positional size. So you put those three together and you look at what they were able to add, not just in high school recruiting last year, where you guys got guys like Alex Caravan and Donovan Clingan, but also in the transfer market, Hassan Diarra coming back and providing that toughness in the backcourt. So I think they're going to be good this year. And I think that this class, I expect them to add one more piece, a big man. And I think that class will, it's top 3 right now. And listen, there's going to be other classes that continue to build out. Kentucky's going to sign some more guys. They could very well end up in the top 3, but I think it's conservative to say that UConn will end with a top 10, very possibly a top 5 class when this is all said and done, because the other piece to this is Solomon Ball and Jalen Stewart are 2 prospects that could continue to climb up the national rankings, because I do think both were potentially under-recruited nationally and have the talent to continue to emerge during the high school season.
The last jab that I'll throw, get you got to from that 2021 class, they lost Rashul Diggins and Corey Floyd Jr. to transfer. So just because it ends as a great class doesn't mean that class is going to come to fruition over the years.
What does the UConn hate stem from? Just the fact that we really pushed your buttons with we were talking about the size of your unborn son, or
no, if we're going to get into the psychology aspect of this, and we're talking alma maters here, I think maybe deep down there's some sort of resentment towards Gino, because I grew up a Tennessee fan and covered Pat Summitt's last season for the student newspaper at Tennessee. And, she and Gino never really got along. If I had to guess, if I had to put my finger on it, maybe there's something subliminal coming out, in relation to Gino. But it's not personal to Dan Hurley. It's more just maybe UConn as a whole.
All right. Well, all I've got to tell you is that Candace Parker ain't walking through that door. But it'll be okay. You'll get over it. Listen, I think the class is very good. And the other thing I will say too, and I mentioned this in my analysis, and this is in all seriousness, we talked about rebuilding the brand of UConn, but the thing that I don't think people are talking enough about is rebuilding the offense that is UConn. And you look at UConn's offensive numbers, and came in Dan Hurley's first year, they were like 98th in the country, something like that. They finished 22nd last year, and they've gotten better each and every year he's been there. And in my mind, that has come in correlation to his ability to remake the roster. And so as they've continued to add talent and specifically skill, it has expanded the things that they've been able to do offensively. And the front court that they're going to have in coming years with Jalen Stewart and Alex Caravan and Donovan Clingan, that's going to be the most skilled front court that Dan Hurley has had probably ever, certainly at UConn. And that's going to only continue to open up doors for what they can do offensively. Everybody knows that a Dan Hurley team is going to be tough. They're going to be competitive. They're going to guard. But offensively, we've seen them continue to get better with each passing year. And I just believe that has come in correlation to the overall talent and skill of the roster.
The door is absolutely open for UConn to make some noise in the Big East with the Jay Wright coaching transition to Kyle Neptune at Villanova. With Providence, you got to think likely to return to earth a little bit in the season ahead, and with the Huskies having the number 3 overall class in 2023 at the moment. The door is absolutely open for UConn. And if you want to learn a little more about the rest of the Big East, and there's some other teams that are recruiting pretty well, go check out our video from last week. We talked a little bit about Nova and maybe their philosophy right now with Neptune stepping in for Jay Wright, and then also getting into Xavier and some of the other teams in that league that are doing well on the trail. But I think that's it for us this week, Adam. Any parting words or parting shots before we? I'm
just keeping the gloves up for your haymakers over here. But
that's
yes,
I'm the one who started it.
It continues to matter here on the Ion College Basketball Podcast.
And Posh Alexander and Zakai Ziegler will continue to prove you wrong. So, and until next time, thanks for joining us on the Ion College Basketball YouTube channel. We'll catch you again soon.